Chapter 2. I was to learn very quickly Inquisitor Sablorn's intentions for Heathmore, and as I've made clear before, I was most undone with the whole prospect. Sablorn did not speak to me or to anyone else on the crew for a few days after we returned to the ship, and all he would do is mutter under his breath about the orcs, statistics, probabilities, and then occasionally he'd curse and snap at someone with an earshot that they were distracting him, and he would be happy to grant execution for them once they had received to a planet side. I'd not seen him quite this excited before. It was on the fourth day of his rantings and ravings that he finally summoned me to his quarters on the ship to speak with me. When I entered his dwelling, he had a data slate in hand, as he mulled over notes, images, and data files that I couldn't read from my angle, but it was clear he was obsessed with them. He wore his uniform, but had neglected to comb his hair so it hung loose around his face like a man deranged. He noted me entering and beckoned me through. "Come in, boy, quickly," he urged. I obeyed, closing the door behind me, and he sat up straight and smirked. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about what we saw on that planet. The arrows we saw on the orcs, the warriors we saw lying next to them. The people of this world are strong enough to engage with orcs and put up a fight. It's intriguing, don't you think?" "Intriguing, I suppose," I agreed. "But, sir, what does this—" "Don't interrupt me," he sneered. "I have an experiment I'd like to begin. A test, if you will. I wish for you to open a new data log and entry entitle it Potential Feral Recruits." I sighed, but did as instructed, and pulled out a data slate from my own bag and began taking down notes for this experiment, then waited patiently for him to again begin speaking. "It is the duty," he said, "of every member of His Glorious Majesty's Imperium to win victories befitting of his glory, and to rejoice in the perfection of mankind. Our race is the most complete and powerful in all the galaxy, even at our most primal stages. And to prove this, and find evidence of therein, I, Inquisitor Harshest Sablorn, have taken it upon myself to begin an ongoing experiment upon the inhabitants of a primitive human world. Name is yet to be determined. On this world are humans who have yet to taste the sweet nectar of glory of His Majesty, the benefits of our technology, or the terrors of our enemy. They are primitive and inexperienced in the way of the far-reaching galaxy, but their battle merits seem unusually refined and impressive. To my knowledge, I've yet to know of primitive humans able to defeat trained orc warriors in combat as these humans have." He paused for a fraction and then turned to snarl at me. "Are you getting all this down?" I nodded in reply. He coughed to clear his throat and continued once I had finished typing. "As stated previously, our race is the most complete and worthy race, even in its most primitive stage of life. And to prove this, I have allowed the spores of the orcs that were destroyed on this world to remain and fester. It is my intention to allow a feral orc colony to be born and nurtured on this world so that they might, in due course, come into conflict with the inhabitants." It was at this moment in the narration that I froze and looked up at Sablorn with a frightened expression that I knew must have infuriated him. He stopped speaking midstream and glared at me with the fire in his dark eyes. "Why did you stop?" "Sir, are you serious?" "I am always serious," he snapped. And this was certainly true. I don't think Sablorn knew the definition of the word joke, and he certainly wasn't interested in learning it. "But, sir," I tried to reason, you can't honestly seek to pit these people against an entire legion of orcs." "It would be a suitable test for them," Sablorn explained impatiently. "Don't fret. The orcs that grow from the spores will be feral. They have no access to their kin to learn the ways of their technology. They will adapt primitive battle tactics and weapons not unlike the population of humans who reside there. It will be a more even war, I suppose." I nearly dropped my data slate, too overcome by distraught disbelief. It was the duty of the Imperium to seek out and rally all humanity to the cause of the Imperium and the Emperor. And now an Inquisitor was going to throw this lost primitive world to a legion of orcs, disarmed though they might be, and he was simply okay with it. No, rather, he was excited for it. "Sir, with all due respect, this is outrageous. You can't go through with this. The men and women of that planet could be citizens of His Majesty in time. You can't play with their lives like it's a game. Where is your basic humanity?" Editorial note. It should be said that I was too young at the time to realize just what I was saying, and I was definitely too naive. For that reason, I feel it necessary to make 2 points quite plain, so that what follows will make more sense. Firstly, no one tells an inquisitor what they can or can't do. Inquisitors will do what they fracking feel like. Emperor damn it all, if an inquisitor wants to have your head cut off for looking at him funny, he can do it and not bat an eye about it. And if Sablon wanted to condemn a planet to death for no other reason than an experiment, then nothing short of a reprimand from the Emperor himself could tell him not to. Secondly, playing with lives is not only something an inquisitor can do, it's something we do on a regular basis. I do not say this as a matter of pride, but more of a matter of fact. Perhaps it has something to do with our status, but I find that the longer we live in these positions, the more easy it becomes to forget our roots. We become more synonymous with angels of judgment in service of the Emperor than men and women in his service. And for this reason, I was most certainly out of line for implying that Sablon had forgotten his basic humanity, though perhaps I wasn't incorrect about it.
"How dare you!"
Sablon bellowed. I shrank back fast, going pale as a sheet. I was an acolyte, but I was no more immune to his punishment than any other individual was from Sablon.
"You dare to question my resolve or my duty to humanity?"
Forgive me, sir. I was wrong. I do not understand the brilliance of your idea. It's beyond my understanding, and I felt, in my ignorance, that perhaps you could explain it to me. Now, you might think me a simpering little snot to suddenly start kissing up to Sablon like this, but in my experience with the man, if you want to avoid his wrath, kiss his ass a little. It definitely worked in this case, as the rage on his face faded slightly into an angry snarl.
"Well, of course you don't understand it. Your stupidity is astonishing. How will you expect to become an inquisitor if you're not able to understand the larger galaxy, boy?"
I simply bowed to him, not saying anything. He was rolling at this point, and it was best to just let him go with it. Sablon did love to hear the sound of his own voice, as I recall.
"The Imperium doesn't have time or inclination to induct every colony into its fold, boy. They must be worthy of it. Would you allow a stray mutt entrance into a room of purebreeds? Would you allow a simple PDF trooper into the same ranks as an Imperial Guard regiment? Even you must understand, not all are equal, even in the eyes of the Emperor. To win His Majesty's favor, we must deserve that privilege. So now the people of this desolate planet must earn it themselves by proving they can contribute to the greater needs of the galaxy."
I gritted my teeth through his whole sermon, but said nothing. Not only because I wanted to avoid getting on his bad side again, if he even had a good side to counter it, but also because I had no words to say in response. I was simply too amazed by the logic in his choice of action. It was profoundly irresponsible, and, to a certain extent, I'd argue treasonous. There's not a shred of context for this action outside of the classic, "I'm an inquisitor and I'll be fracked if I'll be bossed around by anything so lesser to me as rules." But that was the way Sablon was. When I said nothing, though, this seemed to make Sablon calm down a little as his voice lowered when he spoke to me once more.
"The simple truth of the matter is that primitive worlds like this have little to offer us. It's in the path of the Orcs' expansion, and should they come this way within a few centuries in full force, they will be more than capable of decimating the planet's population themselves. We cannot waste time and resources on the defenses of a planet not worth protecting. So before we even begin to allocate such resources to such a defense, I want to see if the people of this planet have any value to them at all."
This was perhaps the first understandable argument that Sablon had made towards his decision-making, and for the briefest moment I found myself agreeing with his viewpoint. But then my young mind turned to the men and women and children on this planet, and a pang of guilt washed over me. Who were we to determine the fate of so many innocent lives? What value did we have over them? Technological superiority? Intelligence? Experience? What was our great value that made us more worthy? These thoughts would haunt my mind for many years to come, and I'd have plenty of time to meditate on them as I began my walk down the path towards becoming Inquisitor. Without anything more to say to me, Sablon ended our conversation there and allowed me to leave, and we would remain in orbit of the planet for another few days before finally being recalled to rejoin the fleet of warships near the heart of the Segmentum. This was fine to the Inquisitor, of course. Orcs can take a few decades to grow, and so there would be little data to achieve at the given time. And as we began to turn our ship away from the planet, I took one last longing look at it. And I confess, I made a silent prayer to the Emperor that he might show his benevolence on this world and save them from the horrific green nightmare that was growing beneath their feet. Now you might think me strange for wishing the best for these people. As an inquisitor now, you might think perhaps I changed my tune a little bit, and in some cases I have. I've learned a lot more about being an inquisitor in my time as one, stuff that I would not have understood as an acolyte. But if there's one thing I never truly let go of, it's the question of validity, of value. Who are we to decide value? Isn't that the Emperor's decision alone? Perhaps I'm foolish and naive still to question it, but question it I do. Editorial note. I would not return to the lands of Heathmore for another 15 years, and in that time the warriors of Heathmore had continued their violent struggle with each other in vain and self-righteous belief in their own superiority. But as the Orcs' presence became ever more known to them, there is ample evidence to show how the factions would react to the presence of this new threat. For this reason, I took it upon myself to collect and archive any data or logs pertaining to the arrival or discovery of Orc activity on Heathmore. The first of these logs is a letter written from a local lord or governor of the samurai called a daimyo, who ruled over a southernmost territory in the region. He writes to the overall commanding body of the samurai as a whole, known as the Dawn Emperor, and his explanation and accounts are most intriguing. It should also be noted that this letter, if I'm correct, was written only 10 years after Sablorn and I began our experiment on the planet. So, I present this letter to you for further understanding of how the denizens of Heathmore were feeling and showing results in this experiment. From A Letter to My Emperor, written by Daimyo of the Southern Border.
Sire, I plead for your aid. Our southern border is in great distress. You have no doubt been told through rumor or report of the strange yokai that haunt the forests of the Maya. I can assure you, these are more than mere rumor. There are beasts which lurk within the swamps. I have seen them. At first they were small things, barely larger than a child. They were more easy to contend with. And for the past few years, they would emerge from the marsh like frogs and make fast and aimless attacks upon our villages. I told you not of them, only because it required little to deal with them. Maybe a few orochi or nobushi to dispatch the creatures. They were never a hindrance, merely a nuisance. But they have changed, Your Highness. They are not the way they were. Only 3 weeks ago, a scouting party I sent into the forest did not return. Then the little green beasts returned, but now they were followed by a group of demons that towered almost taller than our own Shugoki guard. They fought with the strength of 10 men. Their armor was crude and made from wood and bone, but no less effective in standing against our blades. But more horrifying still was that they wore the heads of the scouting party around their torso like trophies. They dangled from belts like ornaments to their barbarism. Note, many orcs were known to steal armor and weapons from their defeated enemies to use themselves, but there are also cases of orcs using heads, hands, legs, and other body parts as ornaments on their armor. It is unclear why they would do this, other than just to boost their own reputation among their kind. It's also unclear how the Fel Orcs learned this tradition. Perhaps it's something ingrained in their species. I dispatched my finest warriors to repel them. The battle was long and grueling. Their methods of war were nothing short of menacing. But in the end we were victorious, though at a great cost. Several of my finest warriors fell, including 3 Kensei, 2 Shugoki, at least 5 Orochi, and even a Hitakiri, all slaughtered. My few remaining warriors nursed their wounds. Sire, I have no reinforcements to send you to reinforce the northern line. In fact, I do not even have a bag of rice to send you. Though we repel this force, I still hear them. Even from behind the walls of my palace, I hear the guttural war cries in the grunting barks like wild animals. They howl in the night like wolves, preying on us as if we were sheep. My samurai are on guard, but I see them tremble. The things they see in the night, the things they report to me, I dare not put to paper. These monsters are not of knight or Viking make. I do not know from what pit of hell they were spawned, but they are not of this world, that I assure you. Please, I beseech you, wise and glorious Emperor, to send us aid. Assist in the defeat of these monsters, for I fear what should become of the Dawn Empire if we are to fall. I hear them now, sire. We may only have days before they come again, and history has shown that with each passing day they grow stronger and stronger. If we cannot hold them here, then I fear they will have easy access to the rest of our empire, and soon even your imperial palace will not be safe. Do not underestimate the barbarism of these savages. Please, your majesty, I am in need of your help. Save us from these green demons. Your loyal subject, Takeda Nobu.
Unfortunately for Daimyo Nobu, the Dawn Emperor did not respond to this call for aid. Much like planetary governors in our own Imperium, the fear of double crosses, sabotage, and trickery withheld his hand. According to my investigation, the Emperor had been told of the orcs previously, but believed them to be superstition or the rambling of fools. He believed the daimyo to be plotting something against him, and thus ignored his pleas. Quite ironic, isn't it? Mankind's thirst for power and fear of losing it often blind us to truth and reason. So it is with our primitive cousins, and so it is with us now. But this would be only the first of the Dawn Emperor's mistakes during my time studying Heathmore. And if you're wondering about the fate of the daimyo himself, I cannot say with exact certainty, but I imagine that even if he'd repelled that particular attack, knowing the tenacity and ferocity of orcs, his village would not have survived. I think we can safely assume his fate is not a happy one. But this was only the first of the engagements the people of Heathmore would have with the orcs, and I regret to say it would not be their last loss either.